Finally!
Hang on.
You can do it.
Put on some shoes. Our parents never owned their own homes. So we jumped at the idea of following that American dream and, raising our kids in our own home.
The majority of people in the United States build their wealth and their financial future with the equity of their home.
A consumer horror story that's becoming all too real for thousands of homeowners.
And these zombie mortgages are robbing people of the equity.
Mortgages that they thought were paid off a long time ago are actually coming back to haunt them, putting some at risk of ending up on the street.
We know it's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these loans are still out there on the books. This is a hugely profitable business.
We came to this story in part because we got records on one particular private equity firm. We called them the foreclosure files.
And we decided that we had a unique chance to really get inside this business and figure out how it operated.
We can see how much money people are making.
A lot of times they're able to get 10, 20, even 30 or 40 times their initial investment.
The personal wealth of the individuals in some of these firms has ballooned.
We thought it was an American dream, but it's become quite the American nightmare.
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
It's a nightmare scenario. A debt collector comes calling, saying an old loan you thought you could stop paying off has suddenly come due, with interest.
At the risk of being a super annoying editor, we want to get this out so that we have a runway to do more.
Follow the story.
Yeah. Owning a home is not as necessarily solid as
Right.
we all kind of assume. And that plays into the story as well, because that's how these zombie mortgages ended up coming back, right?
I'm Noah Buhayer. I'm an investigative data journalist with Bloomberg News, and I've been working for the past couple of months on a story about zombie mortgages. So a zombie mortgage is a loan that was taken out before 2008, typically, that homeowners use to buy their home or pay for home repairs. And then often a decade or so later, after not hearing about that loan for years, a debt collection firm buys it and asks the homeowner to pay back not just the money they took out 10, 15 years earlier, but all the back interest. A key thing in a lot of these cases is if a borrower wasn't getting statements for many years, they may not owe back interest for that time period.
We got kind of a unique perspective into a company that purchases zombie mortgages, ARC-PE. After reviewing almost 1 million documents that we got from Distributed Denial Secrets, they're a journalistic nonprofit that receives and archives hacked and leaked materials in the public interest. We spent months cross-checking the files with public ownership, transaction, loan, and court records, all with the help of a forensic accountant and attorneys who've worked on dozens of zombie cases. It's being portrayed as sort of a passive business of just a typical real estate investment, but we can see how active these sort of debt collectors and debt buyers are and who they're targeting and why.
We're working off of this trove, exclusive stuff that just will feel really fresh.
One of I think the most important things for us right now is what is crucial to the core of what we're trying to do, and what is gravy.
If we start drafting, I think it's obvious what we're missing, right?
In terms of anecdotes, is we don't have someone who has lost their home.
Oh. Wait, Milo, Mimi, just 30 seconds, Shh. Toledo is a very small community, very tight-knit. A lot of us look out for each other. All right, guys, come on, let's go.
I'm hungry.
Well, that's why the breakfast is ready. We ended up having a child, and we realized that, maybe it's time to get into a house so she could have a backyard to run in. We weren't quite there financially to buy a house, but for some reason we got approved, and the 80-20 loan was what was proposed to us to make it look like we could afford the home.
So at the heart of this phenomena is the 80-20 loan, where borrowers would take out two loans. The first would cover about 80% of the mortgage or down payment. The 20% would cover the remainder of the cost for buying these homes.
Some academic work has basically said that a quarter of all mortgages originated in the US in 2006 had one of these, they call them piggyback arrangements, where people basically took out two home loans when they bought a property. And it's those second loans that are really coming back now to haunt people.
Dow plunged to a record low yesterday.
The housing crisis has spread nationwide.
During the 2008 financial crisis, it was just sort of chaos. There were people filing for bankruptcy.
Home prices fell in all 20 cities of the housing index.
Home prices have dropped to a point where the homeowner owes more on both loans than the house is actually worth.
For the financial security of every American, Congress must act.
Some of these firms that lent this money, they went out of business. You had consolidation in the banking industry. And the net effect of that is that a lot of these old, smaller loans just fell through the cracks.
In 2012, we created a new bottom.
How much more down are house prices going to go?
It actually took until about 2012 for home prices to bottom out nationally. And then it took another 4 years or so until 2016 for them to reach the levels that they were at during their pre-crisis peak.
The people who have bought these second loans for pennies on the dollar can see that there is now money to be made in these homes because they've increased in value so much. Around 2020, during COVID, when home prices really shot up, we see this phenomenon spread across the country. And now it's not just in large urban core centers where housing prices have shot up. It's every community in the country that these loans are now worth going after.
I missed you guys. We got some sun. We had some sun playing out in the lake this weekend.
Vienne is an interesting person who we met through the course of our reporting. And I think her case actually really illustrates that asymmetry of knowledge. So in 2018, ARC bought her loan. And soon thereafter, she got a demand for repayment. The following year, a foreclosure action was filed against her in the local county court in Toledo. By the time this process has started to play out, it's early 2020. The whole world has been plunged into the COVID-19 pandemic. And she's presented with a choice. Do I accept this loan modification that's going to lock me in to all of this back interest and fees, or do I lose the roof over my head?
It was surprising to me because we were current on the first loan, but I don't know if it was a scare tactic to try and get locked into some modification. The amount had already doubled, so it was suspicious to me. I just kind of got really nervous about not paying and not having a home.
One of the things that's so interesting about this trove of documents that we were able to review is we could really understand how one of these businesses organizes itself. So this starts from the process of acquiring these loans, often from banks and other financial firms, to doing the underwriting and due diligence to actually figure out which ones were going to be the best to collect on, to actually having a team of asset managers who were trying to figure out how best they were going to be able to collect on these debts.
It is so explicit that we could see in the spreadsheets that there is, once these pools of loans or loans become profitable, there's even a column that says like in the money, and it was like a yes or no. These are properties that appear in the foreclosure files, right? Yeah. But have not been assigned in the data at this point to ARC, right?
So it's...
Jesus, those are all their loans?
They're all in their books somewhere.
Those are...
That's just 4 states.
No,
That's the data set that we've been using to door knock.
Yeah.
Because then it like focuses you. We've got this huge pool of 10,000 loans. We've knocked on doors where we know it's been assigned to ARC, but the borrower has no idea.
And you ask them, like, have you heard of this company? And they're like, I have no idea. But
then
in 2 weeks, they might hear, right? They might get a letter. So we've knocked on, between Noah and I, probably like hundreds of doors. You drive around these communities and you can see how widespread it is. This is the financialization of housing. It's really just a number on a spreadsheet. And if you've been paying your first mortgage and they can see what your home's worth, that's a prime candidate for them to sort of swoop in and start foreclosure proceedings. In most cases, they want to get people on a payment plan because they're paying pennies on the dollar on the debt. And then if they can get you on a payment plan, that often includes a down payment, they get money immediately, and then they're getting monthly payments. And then once it's sort of viewed as like good debt, they can sell that again to somebody else. Also, once they get people on a payment plan, the legal rights of the homeowner really start to wash away because like you agree that you owe this money. And so you're now on a plan for debt that you probably didn't owe.
You don't want to think that you're going to be out on the streets with your kids. Our dream was to have a house, and we wanted to maintain the house for our children. So we kind of just signed it away and agreed to the modifications. When you're desperate, that's when, people try to take advantage of you financially.
Why should someone lose their home and all their equity because some Wall Street bro wants to make more money off somebody? Like, making a profit of a 10% return on the investment is just not enough. They need 1,000% returns on their investment. Hi, Miss Holly. How are you? It's Christy Kelly. Most people aren't going to reach out to a lawyer because if they have money to pay a lawyer, they want to pay their mortgage company because they don't want to lose their home. None of my clients have ever said, I don't owe anything. I don't think I should have a mortgage. They all just said, I don't think I owe that much money. And you know what? They're right because I've actually litigated these cases. I've seen the documents. And part of the problem is consumers dispute that they even owe the debt at all because they received a 1099-C and they thought the debt was canceled. And so why are they now being told they owe not just what they borrowed, but sometimes 2 or 3 times the amount they borrowed?
At the end of 2005, 2006, we were able to finally purchase a home.
It was in a perfect location. It was like 2 minutes from my parents' house from where I grew up. So that was super nice. It just was like the perfect little find for us.
Well, as the economy tanked, for me, business goes down. I'm in the automotive industry, so, people hurt. They're trying to ride their cars out longer and not do the same amount of repairs.
The paycheck's not as
solid. Well, we ultimately looked into what our options were.
Yeah, after we filed bankruptcy, we received the 1099, the cancellation of debt. We filed it with our taxes, and we never heard anything further.
The Amables have a really interesting case because their second loan, which they had taken out in 2006 for $98,000, they have an IRS document that says the debt was canceled. And for normal people, I think most of us would see a document that says cancellation of debt and be like, I don't know this anymore.
And you said your first name is Noah?
Yes. With every borrower story that we look in, it's not just the stuff we found in this cache of documents, but there's lots, oftentimes, of public records behind that. And you want to go look at all of those. And you want to look at old bankruptcy filings. You want to look at really anything you can to make sure the stories add up.
Ticket number B244. Please proceed to Station 8.
I hope these aren't sequential.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so this is everything.
Great.
All right, your receipt's on top.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You too.
Please proceed to Station 6.
These are just some docs so I can help fill in the timeline of what happened to the Amables, going all the way back to when they bought their house in 2005. And the key one here is from 2017. It shows when ARC purchased the loan and recorded that with the county. And this is the loan that's at the center of the dispute. I wanted to know, what was the situation with their first mortgage? Were there other things on title that were going to complicate or change the narrative of their story that I wanted more clarification on? Yeah. Thank you so much. Sounds good. Thanks. Bye. Hey, Jason. How are you? Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Good. Sorry, I was just on with that attorney. We have to be confident that they're credible, right? And I don't want to write about a case if there are doubts about that. So we talked through different components of their case, and he said it's a real crapshoot. He's like, you've got to get like proof positive that like something in the servicing notes that says it was generated but not sent. This is not something we want to find. It is generally not allowed to charge interest on a loan if you're not sending borrowers regular statements. But actually proving that turns out to be a big hurdle for a lot of folks. There's a question of how do you prove in court that you weren't getting statements? So you end up in these situations where it's the borrower's word against the creditors. And if you can imagine just how most of us keep our records, you're asking people to come up with documents from 15 years ago.
What we want to try to do here is to figure out if these statements weren't being sent. So the idea here is to see if we can find a pattern inside the documents. These are the file names.
And they're all the same.
They don't have the other dates. And it's missing the other documentation, the representation of a printed document. So now the idea is to take this pattern that we found and see if we can apply it to all 200 loan files.
Right. What we're trying to track down, right, is whether the statement that was sent to the borrower was actually legitimate at the time, right? Like, we don't have evidence necessarily that they were or were not sent. That's one of the problems we're dealing with, because it's like it could be created at any moment.
Yeah.
But we don't have the mailing records.
So in December 2020, the Amables get a notice of default, which is the first step in California, usually in a foreclosure. And that notice of default said that they owed around $200,000.
ARC had acquired the loan for a little over $2,000. So if they're successfully foreclosing on the Amables for $200,000, their return on that investment would exceed 3,000%.
Oh, the bugs are coming out.
Yeah.
So.
I left messages several days in a row, hoping somebody would get back to me. I was trying to reach out to ARC, and she took the message and said, you know, somebody would contact me. Well, nobody really contacted me, but I did ultimately receive a letter from them with some documentation, which I still didn't quite understand because I still felt like this debt is gone. I don't understand.
It's been canceled. How
It's
can
been
they
canceled. I don't understand.
pursue this the way they're doing it?
In the same spirit that we want to turn over every page, we want to read everything we possibly can, we certainly want to understand ARC's perspective on all of this.
I'm just curious how, like, you and ARC and your staff think about the morals and ethics of this business.
We buy debt for a living, right? So, I mean, is that immoral? No, not in any way, shape, or form. By the way, every bank would be out of business if we didn't do what we did. We try to work with the borrowers as much as we can. We're not, you know, kind of pay to take your home away kind of lenders. A majority of our loans we've done modifications on. A home from both the borrower's point of view and the investor's point of view as a lender is an investment to make a return on their money, not take a loss, right? So you knew what you signed up for, is my point.
What about the statements, the collectability of back interest?
You don't have to be sending regular statements, but you have to show that there is litigation, but you don't have to send regular statements.
So your position is that that's not a requirement?
Honestly, you really need to speak to the servicers about that, not me. But servicers kind of handle that, not me.
David Gordon, one of the managing partners of ARC, got on the phone with us, and he raised to us that ARC, like many of the debt buyers out there, relied on servicers to actually interface with borrowers. And it was really their responsibility to make sure they were following federal and state laws.
But we found evidence in the internal documents of them going around their servicers to directly contact borrowers. We know that they were often setting the price of what they wanted for these loans. So the idea that they were completely separated doesn't hold up with the internal documents.
What we actually have here are some behind-the-scenes documents that show us how the Amables were pleading with ARC and their representatives. It's a contemporaneous account of the information that was filtering back to this investment firm. ARC had hired a servicing firm to try and collect on this debt. The servicing firm, their own employees were like, they have these 1099-Cs canceling the debt. So even people in the industry were confused about the nature of this. And then on top of that, the documents, I think, make a pretty compelling case that they didn't get statements for years.
Okay, we're good to go.
Do we have any updates on getting inside ARC and any other companies that work with ARC or talking to folks?
I've gotten a hold of 4 former employees. They knew very much that a lot of these loan files were just incomplete, inconclusive. They didn't pump the brakes necessarily and say, well, because we don't have definitive proof that these people were getting statements regularly, we're not going to charge for this whole period. That wasn't the move. The move was calculate what we think they owe, see if we can get away with it. They'd contact a borrower, and the borrower would say, what are you talking about? This debt was canceled. And I asked this person, well, what did you guys do in that situation? And did you back down? And he was like, no, ARC never backs down.
Come on, criminals. Well, ultimately, without working with us or giving us a chance in any way, they auctioned the second mortgage. A gentleman ended up purchasing it and showing up on our doorstep on a Saturday to tell us that he had purchased our home and that we needed to vacate. So that's when we ended up here.
I'm just not looking back. I'm trying to just project forward. It's not something we've talked about in a while. At some point, we just we fought and we fought and we fought. And then we just kind of threw up our hands.
What do you do when you can't afford to fight it?
Yeah. It's kind of like what they bank on, isn't it? It's what it feels like. People just struggling to make their dreams come true.
The CFPB has returned over $21 billion to more than 205 million Americans who were cheated by big banks and giant corporations. That is
So the CFPB is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It was established in 2010 in response to the lending practices that precipitated the 2008 financial crisis.
When this financial cop can't do its job, there is no one else in the federal government to pick up the slack.
We know in talking to people at the CFPB that this was an active issue for them and that there would be enforcement actions if it weren't for the fact that the Bureau's basically been silenced so far under the Trump administration. The private equity firm we're interested in was not on their radar. There's this incredible irony with the CFPB. They were created out of the financial crisis specifically to deal with this type of issue. Like, they've taken on payday lenders and other things, but it was really the financial crisis and housing and banks. Right at this moment as we're working on this story, we don't know what's gonna happen, but it seems at best the Bureau is gonna be a shell of what it was.
I just feel like there's a real risk of a boomerang here. But this is a primary business for some of these mortgage servicing companies. So you can see, you could imagine that now that the CFPB is retreated, it's basically been gutted. Servicers saying, we'll take that business again.
Yeah, it's incredibly profitable for them.
I mean, the fact that these zombie cases, these foreclosures are still going on means that somebody out there is still willing to pursue these claims. And this gets back to the whole idea of information asymmetry. Like, a lot of borrowers don't know the law in this area.
In Virginia, our legislature really was one of the first in the country to recognize this problem.
Last bill of the year. This one's got a little bit of heat on it.
All this requires is that if you're going to foreclose on somebody's mortgage and take their house, you've got to provide some evidence you've actually been trying to collect on the debt and that you've been sending them bills, they haven't been paying them, there've been interest and fees.
And so what that bill did was it required creditors to sign under penalty of perjury that every month they're assessing interest, a monthly statement or communication was sent to these consumers.
Christy Kelly, you may unmute.
This does not affect reputable companies and banks. It's essentially preventing debt buyers who can foreclose without any oversight or any court intervention. Debt buyers have far more restrictions in Virginia now to sue on a credit card debt than they do to foreclose on someone's home.
You want to go for it?
There were pretty well practiced attorneys who didn't understand exactly how the process worked. We took a lot to explain it to them.
It's a practice that's sort of outrageous, so I think they were a little incredulous about it, right?
These businesses, it's just like maybe one foreclosure pays for itself for all of the things that they're doing. But for that one family, that one foreclosure, they might have lost everything.
What I didn't understand is why the banks that don't engage in the process still opposed the bill. And the only thought I had about that is that they wanted to continue to try to monetize their bad debt in a more lucrative way.
And we did hear some things that said basically that the market for these is going to evaporate.
Once this bill was passed, there were no second mortgage foreclosures for like a year because no one knew how to follow this law, which it only says you just follow federal law. Just follow the law. It is a complete whack-a-mole problem to try to do it on a state-by-state basis.
Lots of borrowers have been facing this, are going to continue facing this. So are we going to end up with a situation where someone in Wisconsin gets justice, but someone in Mississippi doesn't? That's a big question mark here.
For most people, the equity in their home is how they save or transfer their wealth to their next generation, or it's the nest egg that someone has that they're counting on for retirement. And to lose every cent of that, it's so contrary to the American dream.
How long do you think before it'll be ready?
Give me like
a month?
That's what I'm saying. Like, give me the month of August to like package things up and move it to Cleveland. So, with trying to maintain our income, and I was working 3 jobs at the time, trying to, make sure the kids are taken care of. It became a little bit too much. There was just so much that was not the same anymore. My ex and I ended up separating. Sorry. Sorry. But, at this time, foreclosure is actually kind of a relief because it's allowing me to move on.
When you look at individual borrowers, it's a stark contrast to see how much of this is a transfer of wealth from middle and lower income Americans to a group of debt buyers or investors. You're seeing people lose their homes or being put on payment plans that are putting them into bankruptcy. Meanwhile, we see the debt buyers' wealth increase dramatically during this time period.
What our reporting really shows is that the tangible harm is happening. And this is an area where there's effectively no cop on the beat right now.
And the question is anyone going to pick up that work, or are these homeowners just going to be left, to defend themselves?